Welcome to Rauta. I am Jerry, and this time we're gonna delve deep into the world of early Finnish black metal, namely a band called Barathrum. While this band is no first one coming from Finland in terms of black metal, it's indeed one of the very first bands. I mean, after bands like Berit, Archcode, Imbel, Nazarene made their first visitations, well, Barathrum was one of the first ones to join with these bands. It's actually really hard to put them in the correct order because pretty much things happen around the same time in various parts of Finland. Most of them were from the north, and Archcode was pretty much the only one that started in the southern parts of Finland. But we are not here to talk about the origins of Finnish black metal, we're here to talk about Barathrum. It's a name that means either a deep pit or abyss. So very, very fitting name for a black metal band. And much like many other bands back in the days, they didn't really start with the name Barathrum, but before that it was Dark Feast. And let's be honest about it, Barathrum is a way better name. Luckily they changed the name really quickly early on, so 1991 and onwards we know this entity just with the name Barathrum. And this is a band with lots of lineup changes. Also, quite a few albums. This is one of those bands that have been one of the most active ones throughout the years. And as such, it has always been evolving, yet still kind of being consistent with its given style. And we'll start with the very genre first. This is something I'm gonna disagree here on Metal Archive site because it says genre-wise we're talking about black doom metal. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't really call this so much like doom, even though I know what this is referring to, the rather slow or mid-tempo of the given music. But calling it a doom is, in my opinion, just a little bit misleading, because it's not like de facto that all black metal has to be fast, just because certain Norsecore style pretty much coined it to be the second wave stuff. But if you really go, back in the early days, the first wave and all, it's not that uncommon really. So calling it a black doom can give you a little bit of a wrong idea what the music is like. Surely it is very different from a lot of those bands that operate around the faster pace, especially if you're thinking like bands like, say, early Immortal or most Marduk albums, Dark Funeral and the like. But let's be also honest, there are bands that never gave so much about the speed but focused on other areas, and in Barathrum's case the thing is mostly mid-tempo. But Barathrum is just more than a mid-tempo black metal band. Obviously, much like any other band from this kind of a vast extensive history, there has been a lot of lineup changes. But if one thing is something that kind of summarizes the whole band and puts an certain aspect in the given band, it's Teumo Sova, or Janne Sova, the founder of the band, but also bass player and vocalist, and other instruments along the way, who has always been the founding father of the band and only steady member in the band. If you look at this past member list, it's quite fucking extensive, and not without some very, scene important names along the years. There have been people in various bands, and if you really take a look at it, quite a few of them have other bands along the way. But early years, it was a little bit different. So not that much different bands, with the members and all. But we're not here to discuss the other bands. We're here to talk about Barathrum, how they have changed, what is the music like, how are the lyrics like, how are the covers like, and everything. And it's an interesting trip because nothing really remains the same, yet not too many things have also stayed relatively the same despite of over 30 years in the business. Back in the days, early 90s, a lot of those bands, not only in Finland but also in other Nordic countries and beyond, had their elements coming from thrash metal, even punk, and also death metal. Barathrum is no exception. If you listen to early releases, really the demo phase, from Black Flames to Witchcraft or Witchmaster, Battlecry, etc., you will hear the death metal background in the music. That's not a bad thing, obviously, but it's just very much like a very typical thing back in the days. Think of like early Norway. A lot of bands a lot of these band musicians had their other history with death metal bands. I mean, whether we're talking about guys from Emperor or Mayhem and Dark Throne, Immortal, Barathrum, they all had their death metal bands. And almost like overnight, snap, the bands kind of ceased to exist, got a new moniker and a new style, and voila, the rest is history. It's almost like bands like Mayhem, Dark Throne really sparked the change from death metal to black metal. Finland is not that different. I mean, if you listen to, say, early Archcode, you will hear the death metal presence. Even later on, that's the same thing was with Beherit, so why would Barathrum really be that different? It's also very much present with another old-time Finnish black metal name, or more like black death name, Belial. So Barathrum is one of those names that kind of had the black metal star there with, a little bit death metal in the mix. But nonetheless, it was still already mostly very much like creating black metal. So very early on, because back in 1991 or 1992, there barely were more than a handful of black metal bands, and most of them were not really doing, albums. So it was this demo phase which Barathrum was taking place. However, they took a little bit longer, to release their first album. It is as late as 1995. Obviously, that is still very, very early on in terms of Finnish black metal, because most Finnish black metal bands didn't release an album before like 2001. There were a handful of bands that had a few albums out before 2000s, but a lot of things, even with the bands founded in early 90s or mid 90s, didn't have that much going on. So in Finnish sense, 1995, very early. And this didn't come out with only just one album, but two, Hailstorm and Eerie. And now something worth mentioning, which is also mentioned here on Metal Archives. The first 8 albums basically spell out Hail Sova. So, reference to the Mr. founder of the band, Demono Sova. This is coming from the words like Hailstorm, Eerie, Infernal Legions of Perkele. Hail, and then S-O-V-A, Sova, from, Satana, Occult, Venomous, and Aspera. Now you can pretty much figure out what else is happening with albums like Fanatico and Urberkill. Basically, F-U. Maybe C and K next. We don't know, but that's already the speculation out there. So after the demo phase, 1995 started this album called Hailstorm. If you really think about it, it's almost like a winter forecast metal, thinking of Immortal and the like, but also very much giving you the feeling of the time, back in the 90s, cold, the grimness of winter, everything was kind of related to black metal. I mean, darkness and cold are very much hand in hand in the Nordic countries. So even if for other people it might make a joke like, why are you singing about hailstorms and winter, snow, ice and all that stuff, might feel a little bit ridiculous. But if you live in the Nordic countries where it is kind of a normal, it's also very, very grim season and also something very inspiring. So, while Hailstorm might not sound the most badass, most evil and vile-sounding black metal album, it kind of makes a lot of sense. What is also worth mentioning is that very early on, Barathrum got this visual style with the given, signature symbol of the band, which is basically spelling 666 with a little bit more angles than your circle or sixes. Very cool design if you ask me, and very early putting that out. So the first album, an hour full of mid-tempo black metal. To be honest, it's quite demo-ish still after a few demos in the making, meaning it's kind of not the most catchiest of them all, not the most memorable songs of them all, and I don't know what happened to the browser or net connection, died. Anyway, while we're waiting for things to happen magically, get them fix themselves. Hailstorm focusing on creating something different than of those fast-paced black metal bands. Not the most grim indeed, but still giving you the kind of evil-sounding black metal, just with more mid-tempo and all. And that is, in my opinion, very, very interesting, because what else? But Metal Archives decided to die on me. It is interesting because it's kind of managed to sound very different from a lot of those other bands. Meaning, when you compare it to, say, Norwegian or Swedish bands, Barathrum really didn't have much in common, except, of course, the topics, the lyrical sides and all that stuff. But riff-wise, it's quite a different. And that's part of the charm with Barathrum because it's kind of unique sounding with its own style. The very same thing was continued with Eerie, which came the same year. This time featuring one form of Demon of Sova on the cover with the pentagram and all. Not maybe the best cover out there, but still. What is curious though, this was also more than 1 hour all in all, which is quite extensive if you really think about it. The style wasn't that much changing, but I guess it is because these were really so much back to back, tapping from the demo roots and all. With Infernal, the third album 1997, things started a little bit to change. It was obvious that the production got a little bit better, the songwriting was in my opinion more focused, and that's where the first so-called hit song starts emerging, songs like War Metal. Very catchy title, and back in the days, mind you, War Metal wasn't that so much of a thing, even though of course Blasphemy had existed for a while, but it's not like people were speaking so much about War Metal back in the 90s, not in the sense of being in its own scene and all. But what really, blew up the roof, was Legions of Perkele in 1998. This was a game changer. Suddenly, they had even better, proper label, one could say. And the production was really fucking heavy. I mean, if you think about those guitar works, the drums, bass, which has always been one of the foundations. I mean, there used to be the phase where I think Barathrum had 3 bass players. Can you imagine that for most bands? And suddenly this production was like a really, really big budget band. A huge step in terms of production. Some might feel like a little bit disappointed because somehow this changed the whole game in so many ways. But in my opinion, it really did a big service, like a big favor to the band, putting it on their different level on the map. Suddenly there were also quite a few of these hit songs already after the intro, which is not that great but very fitting for the mood. There's Revenge by Magic, a catchy song, followed by Angel Burner, another catchy song. Then a basic Barathrum song was followed by another another hit song, Last Day in Heaven. And of course there are songs like Necromancer Ritual and finally The Return of War Metal. So all in all, this became kind of a hit album and a lot of people were praising it, and this really put Barathrum on the map in a very, very different fashion than before. And it clearly is one of the most important albums of the Barathrum legacy. And finally, on the cover, you will see this Barathrum symbol which I mentioned earlier on, and of course with the name Legions of Perkele, it was very, very Finnish sounding thing. Something that you will hear if you listen to Barathrum's music, how certain things are pronounced, like necromantical ritual. Isn't sounded like that. It's necromantical ritual, basically. So, very, very, kind of Finnish vibe to it. This was quickly followed by Satana, which then again continued the Legion style with similar fashion, but not as catchy, not as heavy. And this also put back a Demon of Sova on the cover with the photos of skills of the time. Solid album, no weak points as such, but let's be honest about it. Compared to Legions of Perkele, this didn't really come with a surprise, nor those similar hit songs. But mostly around, the same style, same quality and all. That was then again followed with a very, very surprising album cover for a black metal release. A naked, beautiful female person, pregnant. Not exactly your typical black metal cover, but I guess it, made waves or moved eyebrows. This was the start of 2000s. So here it is. 2000s was released a song. And mind you, this is worth noting. Only 36 minutes and then some. Which is kind of curious because it's almost like half the length of the first initial albums back in the days. So basically things change with Legions of Perkele in a couple of ways. Less songs, more focus, more hit songs and all that stuff. So it was almost like, Barathrum entering phase 2. This was then again followed by Venomous, which is then again nothing surprising after Legions of Perkele. Basically all these albums, one after another, were pretty much, continuing on the same path. So it's almost like this phase 2 kind of locked certain elements in the game, which then again solidified Barathrum style, the very bass-driven, mid-tempo black metal with their trademark vocals of Demon of Sova style, which is more raspy, not that screamy or shriek like so many other bands, yet not really the kind of a black metal flirting death metal style, which some bands decided to do later on, or switching between two different styles. And once again, that was continued 3 years later. Mind you, there was this really big creative season with Barathrum. Then came this Anno Aspera album, 2003, years after Bastard's birth. And once again, keeping it very, very kind of simplistic and focused with 37 minutes of music, and once again including the Barathrum symbol here. So forgetting the photos and weird photoshops, getting back to the basics. Now then another shift happened. Something like 12 years between the albums of Anno Aspera, the 8th album, and Fanatico 2017. Now obviously if you take this members list into closer look at the band members, you will see that early on, the 90s, a lot of changes. Then more changes in the 2000s, so a lot of changes throughout the years. And of course, people might speculate how much in general these had to do with the band, but of course, band is way more than certain players. After all, it was Demon of Sova's band. Be it as it may, Fanatico resulted to be, in my opinion, a really good, if you can call it, comeback album. I'm using quotation marks because really the band wasn't disbanded or anything, but there was this season when nothing was really happening. I mean, the band was playing gigs here and there, obviously, but, in terms of recording an album, 12 years seems quite a lot, really. However, another successful chapter, and one could even say the birth of the third phase. Nothing much really changed in terms of Barathrum style, but it was almost like refined into something a little bit different. And now maybe trashier elements around Aspera and Fanatico started entering the game. And here we are, back in the photos of stuff. Also more like, War in Creation, the cover, and Demon of Sova being on the cover with, well, kind of a bizarre cover, but I think again, very, very Barathrum filled thing. I remember this being a positive surprise, and it's not like I never liked the previous ones, but maybe the band was more like, a little bit stuck in the mud. Like nothing really was getting renewed, and there were no changes. They were not like bad albums or anything like that. In my opinion, Barathrum has been very, very consistent and its own style throughout the years. No weird experimentations like so many bands decided, like, let's do industrial early 2000 after Matrix and all, or let's start adding death metal or whatever. Barathrum was like, fuck it, we're gonna focus on our stuff, keeping it mid-tempo. Surely some albums have a little bit trashier take versus whatever there was before, but these changes are not that drastic. So when Uberkill came later, earlier this year, but still 7 years after Fanatico, I was thinking it had to be something like 4. How time flies, really. Uberkill, I was told, disappointed some people because some people were expecting more trashier stuff, and it's actually a little bit more melodic Barathrum, yet still being in the mid-tempo era and all. So maybe some people were disappointed in that, because at the same time, it kind of renewed the pattern, yet kept the same, but removing some elements. Maybe the trashier parts got kind of replaced by the more melodic ones. And in my opinion, Uberkill is actually one of the best, or maybe the best, Barathrum album up to date, which is quite of an achievement considering the band has been in the game for over 30 years and with a massive amount of lineups. So all in all, to summarize it a little bit, nothing too much changed along the year. The mid-tempo elements were right there all the way through. And also being black metal all the way through. Not like I mentioned, no big experimental takes, not adding too much melodies, not like female vocals or lots of keyboard things. Nothing of that sort was happening with Barathrum. So they kind of maintained the focus, despite of the changes, despite the years or whatever. And I think I'm really proud in that sense because I've known Demonosova. I think we met like summer 1995, might have been fall 1995. But anyway, I was relatively new to the black metal, having it here only for like a couple of years. And I think through mutual friends, we befriended with Demonos, and ever since been friends and good times also, drinking, listening to albums, meeting up in festivals and shit. So always been a nice guy, and that's something I can actually say. Of all the guys I remember meeting through the Barathrum years, that all the guys have been nice, cool guys. Some more badass than the others, but the point remains the same. No assholes, in my perspective anyway. Always have good times with these fine gentlemen, and fine. There are some alcoholics in the band, or have been at least, or maybe still is. In terms of lyrics, now that we've gone through the musical styles and the cover art and all, Barathrum hasn't really changed that much in that sense. Of course, songwriting and as well as lyrical writing has kind of evolved, kind of a little bit more mature over the years, which kind of makes sense. But the basic things are still there. I mean, here on the themes on Metal Archives it says Satanism, occultism, darkness, death, the kind of a typical for black metal. But I will go even further and say, because I read pretty much all I could from the lyrics I could find. So there are parts where it gets a little bit romantic. There are also parts where it gets kind of a crazy, talking about, of course, along deaths with torture and all that stuff. And of course, Christianity, God, Jesus, whatever, gets their slaps on the face. So it has maintained these anti-religious takes. Even some other religions have gotten their fair share through the lyrics, but I guess Christianity, like with most Nordic black metal bands, have been the main enemy and gotten the most attention. But there are lots of lyrics about like witchcraft and witches in general, certain perversions, so all that stuff. Nothing too surprising really, but then again, overall, not the worst, not the bad, not the best time of black metal lyrics in my opinion. Then again, I really find a lot of lyrics not that fascinating, to be honest. As I'm getting older and more cynical, it's hard to really get too enthusiastic about the basic lyrics, if you know what I mean. But Barathrum has nothing to shame, I guess. That's the bottom line to take here about lyrical sense. So all in all, one of those most consistent names in Finnish black metal scene, and it's something that is cool to see on live, and some people have been saying that Barathrum has been, for like past couple of years, been their stronger suits in terms of live. So maybe these lineup changes are actually done good for the band. And I gotta say, I am still proud having to be, warm up for them in 1999 when we performed with Nightside before Barathrum and Thaiser. One of the kind of warm memories I still have about the band back in the days and all that stuff. So yeah, this is one of those names that people should be checking out and knowing if they want to know something about Finnish black metal history. It's an important band, maybe in ways more important than, say, bands like Beherit, given their track record with Barathrum is as extensive as 10 albums already versus, Beherit's a little bit fewer in terms of black metal. So very early on into the game and always been, the kind of a trusted band in so many ways, in terms of music, in terms of quality, etc. So if you haven't seen Barathrum or if you haven't, gone through their discography, I think it's time to do that. You can find most of these albums, if not all, on your regular streaming services. And if you want to go even further, like check out the demo material early on, so you can find them on YouTube. Just mind the sound quality. It is what it is. Coming from back in the 90s, you cannot expect too high quality in terms of, production value and whatever. But still, a solid band, and let's hope they will keep the style of and quality of Uberkill and Fanatico coming on later years. And let's hope they will maybe keep making more albums still, now that they are not young guys anymore. This is my take on Barathrum. Do you have a favorite release or favorite era of Barathrum? Do you have favorite memories about the band throughout the years? Let me know, and of course check out my interview back in the days with Demono Sova and other guys with Barathrum. I hope someday we will make a new one, talk about the present and all. But now off you go. Go enjoy some Barathrum, and you will find some links in the description box, so clickety click, start listening. Off you go, bye bye.